Thursday of the 12th week in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the book of Genesis. Abram's wife Sarai had borne him no children. She had, however, an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. Sarai said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from bearing children. Have intercourse then with my maid. Perhaps I shall have sons through her." Abram heeded Sarai's request. Thus, after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, his wife Sarai took her maid Hagar the Egyptian and gave her to her husband Abram to be his concubine. He had intercourse with her, and she became pregnant. When she became aware of her pregnancy, she looked on her mistress with disdain. So Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for this outrage against me. I myself gave my maid to your embrace. But ever since she became aware of her pregnancy, she has been looking on me with disdain. May the Lord decide between you and me." Abram told Sarai, "Your maid is in your power. Do to her whatever you please." Sarai then abused her so much that Hagar ran away from her. The Lord's messenger found her by a spring in the wilderness, the spring on the road to Shur, and he asked, "Hagar, maid of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She answered, "I am running away from my mistress Sarai." But the Lord's messenger told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her abusive treatment." "I will make your descendants so numerous," added the Lord's messenger, "that they will be too many to count." Besides, the Lord's messenger said to her, "You are now pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard you. God has answered you. This one shall be a wild ass of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. In opposition to all his kin shall he encamp." Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named the son whom Hagar bore him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good." Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Who can tell the mighty deeds of the Lord, or proclaim all his praises? Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. Blessed are they who observe what is right, who do always what is just. Remember us, O Lord, as you favor your people. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. Visit me with your saving help, that I may see the prosperity of your chosen ones. Rejoice in the joy of your people, and glory with your inheritance. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not drive out demons in your name? Did we not do mighty deeds in your name?' Then I will declare to them solemnly, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers.' Everyone who listens to these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and buffeted the house. But it did not collapse. It had been set solidly on rock. And everyone who listens to these words of mine but does not act on them will be like a fool who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and buffeted the house. And it collapsed and was completely ruined. When Jesus finished these words, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as their scribes. The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from Genesis 16, 1-12, and 15-16. Sarai has not yet borne a child, and it looks as if she's barren. So Sarai decides that Abram should sleep with her slave girl, Hagar, and bear a child that way. When the child was born, it would be placed upon Sarai's knee as a form of adoption. Now this was a custom in Babylonia at the time that the Code of Hammurabi was written, around 1900-2000 BC. It was not the practice at the time that this account was written down, around the time of King David. So this gives us an indication that the story about Abraham is very old, dating back to the time that Abraham is thought to have lived, around 1800 BC. Well, the idea that Abram would be clever and try to get a child from the Lord through this technique is possibly a sign that his faith is not as strong as it should be. He's trying to figure out a clever way to make God fulfill his promise. When the child is born, he's named Ishmael, and he's sent off into the desert with his mother, because he's not supposed to be the child of the promise. Now what's difficult is that there are two versions of how he was sent away. One has to deal with the fact that Hagar is treating Sarai badly, the other that Ishmael is treating Isaac badly. This is typical of the story of Abraham, where we have two levels of the story, probably told at different sanctuaries at different periods of time. And when they put this story together in Genesis, they didn't sort out one from the other, they told both stories. In the ancient world, that was not a problem if there were minor inconsistencies, because the theory was that both somehow told the truth. Well, even though Ishmael is not to be the son of the promise, he nevertheless is promised a very great future. He would be the father of many nations, because in fact, he is the son of Abram, therefore he is some way blessed by the Lord. The Gospel is from Matthew 7, 21-29. This is the end of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus tells people that they should build their house on a rocky foundation, on solid foundation, and not on sand. That words are not enough. You can't say that you're a follower of Jesus just because you use his name, because you said a lot of prayers in public. You have to live his life. You have to base your faith upon who he is. And then when the storm comes, you'll be able to withstand the storm. There are many people who go through a lot of religious practices, and when the difficulties of life occur, the death of a loved one, the loss of a house, of a job, a serious illness, they lose their faith because their faith was only based upon a superficial understanding of what it meant to be a person of faith. True faith is to toss one's life, one's love, into the hands of the Lord, believing that the Lord will uphold one. And may God bless us.